Thank you, Mr Speaker. Speaking to the Tariff New Zealand, Hong Kong, China Closer Economic Partnership Agreement Amendment Bill, and Mr Speaker, noting that Hong Kong is New Zealand's 9th largest export destination, and New Zealand's trade with Hong Kong is currently worth $823 million a year, and so the first reading of this bill is indeed exciting for New Zealand. I just want to make perhaps a comment on the contribution of the previous speaker to note that there is nothing in this free trade agreement which supersedes the provisions of the Overseas Investment Office, and so the issue of the purchase of New Zealand dairy farms by Chinese companies is a matter which is completely unrelated to the contents of this free trade agreement. With those words, Mr Speaker, New Zealand farmers depend on trade, particularly sheep and beef farmers. Mr Speaker, for example, 90% of the Alliance Group's product coming out of freezing works up and down South Island are exported, and a lot of that export goes into Hong Kong and China, and so this free trade agreement, which we're doing its first reading, is pretty critical and crucial to the health of the New Zealand sheep and beef industry, not, of course, to neglect our dairy industry as well. So, Mr Speaker, this bill, this free trade agreement, is all about boosting innovation in New Zealand and improving export access to world markets. This is one of this government's key policy drivers for New Zealand's export performance. This closer economic partnership is Hong Kong's first free trade agreement, aside from its closer economic partnership agreement with mainland China, and that's pretty significant. The closer economic partnership also complements New Zealand's free trade agreement with China and enhances the potential for Hong Kong to be used as a platform for trade into mainland China, a point not lost on the Speaker across the House, thus making Hong Kong a strategically important trading partner, as if we didn't know that already, for New Zealand. So, Mr Speaker, this deal will help New Zealand businesses boost trade with Hong Kong and take further advantage of growing opportunities for New Zealand in the region. Just briefly, Mr Speaker, the closer economic partnership will ensure that New Zealand's existing duty-free access is locked in by binding in place duty-free access for all New Zealand exports. The tariff reductions New Zealand has provided Hong Kong are the same as the tariff reductions in the New Zealand-China Free Trade Agreement, which are tariff elimination on 54% of exports upon entry into force. The remaining 46% will progressively become duty-free by 2016, which is, in export terms, not that long in the future. And longer tariff phase-out periods apply for import-sensitive sectors such as textiles, clothing and footwear, and also on products such as steel and furniture. And also, probably worth noting, the closer economic partnership provides a 48-hour customs clearance of New Zealand's exports, so an easing of those provisions, making trade more possible and more timely with both Hong Kong and mainland China. Mr Speaker, with those few comments, I commend this bill to the House.